welcome everyone. Welcome to the next day working through Genesis in the King James's Bible. We are on chapters 20, 21, 22 and 23. That's what we're going to cover today. I have posted all of the chapter links under this video because the names and everything, I won't be going into a lot of detail. I'm giving quick overviews of each chapter, how I've taken it from reading it. And then the rest is up to you. So here we go. Chapter 20. We are going back really with more detail now from chapter 14, when we saw Abraham, when he was journeying away from his homeland and he starts settling in the land that God had presented to him to stay, which was between Kadesh and Shur. So he was between this land, and then he hears of this famine. And so as he hears of this famine, he worries that it's going to come to him. And so he moves forward and he goes to Gerar, which is where the Pharaoh is, King Abimelech. So he heads towards there, and this is where he's saying to his wife that she must be known as his sister because otherwise he'd be killed. So they venture there, and the king takes Abraham's wife, says like thank you, because he's saying this is my sister, you may have her. So he takes her into his world, and then the king goes into this dream, and in the dream God comes to him and he says to him that the woman he has taken is another man's wife, and he pleads with God and he says, please God, I did not know this, please can you spare my life? Because obviously in chapter 14, it explains that there's a plague going on around him, so he's asking for his life to be spared. And God confirms that he knows that Abraham lied about Sarah being his sister, didn't actually tell the truth. And he tells the king to return Sarah, and that Abraham will pray for him and he will not die, so his life will be spared. And God is really protecting Sarah's womb because he knows that she is going to be the one to carry on this lineage of Abraham. So this is what this is all about. So first thing in the morning, the king awakens and he gets all of his men, he gathers them together, and he goes towards Abraham and he says, why? Why did you lie to me? And this is when Abraham actually says, look, I thought you were going to kill me, because if you knew she was my wife, you would have killed me. And plus, he even goes around the houses a bit and says, well, in a kind of round way, she is like her father is my father. So really, he's not actually being that truthful, is he? There's parts of him that's not playing that full character. But anyway, the king gave Abraham all of these possessions. He gives them all of these, and he returns Sarah to Abraham, and then he says, go forth, you can have whatever land you want. And he says to Sarah, your brother here, so he refers him, I don't know whether he's just joking or whatever, but he's like still refers to him as his brother. Maybe it's because Abraham said this and he just wants to believe whatever he says, who knows. And he says to Sarah that he's giving him 1,000 silver coins. So then he's got this 1,000 silver coins. And Abraham decides he's going to pray for the king and his wife and all his servants. And they will be able to then bear children, because God has stopped them being able to bear children because of the protection he has over Sarah. So the curse is lifted and they are allowed to leave, and all is well in that kingdom. So that is chapter 20. So now we're into chapter 21. And chapter 21 is when Sarah gives birth to a son, exactly as God said she would. And she is very old. And they name the son Isaac, just as God said. And Isaac is then circumcised when he's 8 days old. And at this time, Abraham is 100 years old. So we're getting a lot of details. And Sarah is laughing at this point because she can't believe she's just given birth at such an old age. She's finding it quite comical. Isaac is then weaned, and they have a feast to celebrate his growing up. And Sarah sees that Ishmael, the other son of Abraham, is mocking Isaac, and she says to Abraham, I want you to get rid of them both. I don't want them to have any inheritance. Get them both away. And at this point, Abraham's quite upset because obviously he loves his son. It's his first son. And but God says to him, has this communion again with God, and God says to him, look, listen to your wife. Do as she says. I will bless Ishmael. All will be well. So he tells Ishmael and Hagar, the Egyptian servant to Sarah, to go. He gives them food and water, and they go. And they end up going out to the desert, and the water starts running out, and she starts pleading to God, please help, because she's in distress, out in the desert with Ishmael. And God helps, and he opens her eyes, and she sees water, and they end up making a life for themselves in the desert with this water. Ishmael becomes an archer, and she finds also an Egyptian wife for Ishmael. So all is well in that world. Now we move on to King Abimelech and his chief captain. They want to make a treaty with Abraham because obviously they see him as in this communion with God all of the time. He's obviously powerful, and they want to make this peace treaty with him. So Abraham swears that he will make peace with him. But he then brings up this well that the king's men had stolen from him. And the king doesn't realise this until now. This is what he's just understood. And he says, okay, this is all I'm aware. And he said, right, I'll bring you these sheep and oxen, and I'll give them to you, the king. So that's what he does. And he makes this covenant with the king. And then he brings 7 lambs by themselves and lays them out. And the king asks, why are you putting these 7 lambs here? What's this all about? And he says, this is to witness I have dug this well, and it's compensation for it, basically. That's why it's there. So the kings then go back to their lands, and he plants this tree in Beersheba, which is where the well is, and he calls on the Lord for protection, because there's a lot going on, So he's calling on the Lord, and that ends our chapter 21. Now we move into chapter 22. And this is sometime later. God calls on Abraham, and he asks him to do one major thing, and that is to sacrifice his son Isaac, to sacrifice him. What? How? Why? What? That's what you would be going through your head. It's but he has to have this faith in the Lord, and so he does as the Lord asks, and he goes up to this hill with his son, who is confused. His son's like, why am you doing this? Why is there not a lamb to sacrifice? But he's following the Lord, so he gets up early in the morning, takes his son up to this hill, and he's about to sacrifice him when suddenly an angel stops him and shows him there's a ram nearby, and this can be used to sacrifice instead. And as this happens, this is when the promise is then confirmed that God made with Abraham, that he did as the Lord asked. And so it's he's sort of testing his faith, if he's going to do these things, knowing what he told him earlier and following it, even though things are changing in the world. So the promise is confirmed, and then the last part just discusses Nahor's lineage. So he is Abraham's brother, and it goes on to basically detail his wife, that he had a wife, and he had 8 sons through his wife, and he also had a concubine and had 4 sons through her. And that ends our chapter 22. Now we move on to the final chapter today, which is chapter 23. And sadly, this is when Sarah dies at age 127. And Abraham is really upset. He's really mournful and, upset that he's lost his wife, which anyone would be. We're going to grieve. So Abraham asks the Hittites to purchase property to bury Sarah. And they see him as a prince. So they say, whichever, you can have whatever, tomb that you want. You can bury her there. Abraham wants the Hittites to plead on his behalf to Ephron, son of Zorah, to purchase the cave of Machpelah. And I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing all of this wrong, because I'm not great with these words. He wants her buried there. And so, and he builds an altar to the Lord there as well. And so Ephron heard Abraham's request, and he offers to gift the land to Abraham. And then he suddenly suggests a high price. And instead of Abraham like trying to barter and say, no, this is not, I'm not paying this, he just accepts the price, and he buries his wife in that cave after paying whatever the price was. And so that is the end of chapter 23. This concludes our 3 chapters. The first one, chapter 20, we saw us going back to that segment in chapter 14 where he visits the king and he decides to say that his wife is his sister and causes all of this commotion but he does come out of it quite wealthy, doesn't he? He leaves with all this silver and animals to really build his empire, so it's slowly starting to build up there. Chapter 21, we see the birth of Isaac, and we see the departing of Ishmael, his first son, going off into creating a world for himself in the desert with his mum and his new wife, Egyptian wife. And we also see in chapter 21 Abraham getting this well. So, you need water out there, right? So it's an important thing, a well. So he then gets himself this well, and it's made very significant in chapter 21. Chapter 22, we see him sacrificing his son. So really taking that faith, to follow out what God is saying in the hope that it will not. And it pays him well, because we see that the angels stop. A ram is then used as the sacrifice, and he gets to keep his son, and we detail more of the lineage from Neha, which is Abraham's brother. So we're covering more details there with the names. The links, by the way, are under this video for the chapters, so you can read up on all the names yourself there. I'm not the greatest, as I've said in the video, at pronouncing these names, so it would be better just to read it in your own way there. And then the final chapter, chapter 23, is when Sarah dies. We see her depart, and Abraham then buries his wife. And there we go, that concludes. So we are going on a real journey with this book. So yes, the Bible has a lot of content in it. We've just gone through these. We're up to chapter 23 and we already have so much detail covered. We have gone from Adam and Eve, and seeing how they have then created this world by eating from that tree of knowledge. Suddenly we now have people creating, and from that creation we have Abraham, and we're following Abraham and a bit of Lot's story, and we're going through this world of creation, how we are coming into beings. Now we've got his 2 sons in the story, and it's getting bigger and bigger as the world grows. And if you look at our world today, like how huge and how many people are on this planet, and just the interweaving of stories, like how you have a higher power that is guiding your life, all of us do, and how that plays out in our lives is very different depending on whether we want to be in control. When you see Abraham, when he's wanted to take the reins and tried to do it differently, things haven't always worked out, but when he follows the Lord, things do work out. That's what this book is showing. It's showing that. So thank you for taking the time out of your day today to listen to this video and go through these chapters with me. It's been a pleasure going through it, and yeah, I'll be back tomorrow to carry on with more chapters within Genesis. So take care, and I will see you again soon. Bye.